Hello and most welcome to 810 of our H series. And today I will take something from our dear friend Ashish Dalela way over there in India. Bangalore, I think it was, I'm not sure. He has this very nice article, and for some reason it has the emblem of the Masonry order. And oddly enough, in the car to this place, I was talking about the Masonry order. I don't know why, it doesn't have any special interest for me or anything like that. And as well, in the article, I don't find a really good reasons for putting the Masonry order into the context. It's just used as an example with no specific point to that being an order, more in the sense of being Masonies. And what he's taking up is something incredibly interesting, and it's the difference between quality and quantity. We mentioned before this divide between ordinals and cardinals, and usually one part is prioritized while the other one is marginalized. In this context, it's almost always the case that the cardinals take the lead position, the head position, because qualitative science is something that we don't do that much anymore. Yes, quantum mechanics is definitely a qualitative science, 100%. Quantity does not matter. You check one instance of the collapse of the superposition, not thousands or millions of them. Quantitative truths are pervasive. They are true in a pervasive way, so they have a lure on us. If somebody says, it's an example here, 2 + 2 is 4, we agree. Quantity is good. Open the newspaper and you see 65% on the way to work use mobile phones or something like that. 35% are going to buy a bag and box of wine tonight at the Systembolaget, and so forth and so forth. We are overwhelmed with this quantitative, these cardinal things. They seem to be much more important than anything else. And there is an odd thing. My dear colleague here pointed out, we have the Passare of Newton here as well. One of his favorite things. That is a quantity measure. And Newtonianism, as it became, maybe not 100% from its outstart, but as it became the measurement for what is good. And that is always quantitative. The more figures you have, the better it is. It becomes truer. And that, of course, comes from industry. Industry produce quantity, not quality. Quality was of the past. The quality is also connected to the balance we have. To make quality perceptions or judgments, we need to be in balance as well. And that is a problematic thing that actually goes for this thing in one instance. If you're going to do one measurement, it's acutely important that you are in balance to use it. It doesn't work by itself. Your balance is the starting point. Everyone is differently good at handling that tool. But you see here, if you give quantity, the median is going to be fairly good. And I think that is one of the reasons we say, quantity is fair enough. Ashish do not agree with this for good reasons. It's the development of the industrial era and the slow switch from quality to quantity. And in the end, I would say at late 18th century, quantity had taken over completely. Everything now is measured by the cardinals, that they are more important. And that's also the tool of the people using Newton. And this is where the example of masonry comes in. Masons are typical of using quantity rather than quality. They are the hard workers of the society. What they do, you can see all around you. They construct buildings, town, churches for that reason as well, roads, bridges, ports, you mention it. Everything comes from quantity. But is quantity really a good measure for things like causal effect? We want to know what happens in our lives, for instance, what happens around us. Is that a good way of knowing reality? Let me give you an example here. If you were to travel in time, or maybe that also you were present at the time, when Italy had sort of a lack of economic stability, there was turmoil in the country, many strikes. And would you, as a journalist, and a lot of journalists did that, I would say the majority, to use a quantity phrase, they would have said that this instability is going to lead to maybe a change in government, a lot of new elections, change in structure and so forth. But could they know underneath there was a coup d'etat brewing? No, that's a qualitative response. You can never figure out unknown things with quantity. Never. Quantity never gives that measure. So it didn't matter how much they measured the economy, people's lack of confidence to the government, things boiling underneath. Putting that into perspective, giving it different scales. These are things of quantity. We often presented with these graphs in newspapers and in educational system. No, to know that there were coup d'etat growing somewhere, you need to make a qualitative investigation. That's the only thing. You need to put yourself into balance, because in a qualitative investigation, you are the pinnacle. Everything starts with you. And there were actually people who did that. Very few. And I think that's amazingly interesting. Even to this day, people do that. But we need that knowledge to be able to foresee the future. Because there are many problems with this. One thing, statistic is not self-evident. To know your statistic, to know the figures, what they mean, you need to have as much knowledge as the whole world. There is no escaping that. That's one major downtake on quantity. Otherwise, you can't know exactly what these figures means. Quality is more connected to yourself. How you standing? What is your knowledge and how acute is it? It's more like a magnifying glass. You can magnify something that is so little it won't be perceptible for this. While speaking about little, another reason quantity doesn't cut the chase is something that we mentioned many times, and it has to do with the causal effect of quantity. Usually people assume there is if you have a huge quantity, it's going to have a huge effect. Is that true really? Is that the real McCoy? No, it's not. We learned from, for instance, Benoit Mandelbrot and others that the connection between quantity and effect is mysterious, to say the least. And that's called the butterfly effect. in general talk, and it means that incredibly small amounts, quantities, can have a huge impact. Once more, that's a very good reason to stick to quality. And quality was, in my former field, I was really interested in philosophy. I discovered in the philosophy library that were loads of books dating from 1902, 1903 and earlier, almost a century back, that were, the majority were in German or French, and they were all about the continental philosophy. I could only find 3 books with the British philosophy, the Anglo-American philosophy of logocentrism or logic positivism or whatever you call it, analytical philosophy as we know it. And how odd, how come? Well, I would say the main reason is this huge change took place in Sweden was quantity, because continental philosophy at that time was 100% quality, whereas analytic philosophy base everything they say it's true on an estimation on quantity. Their truth is quantity, and that truth is really, really unstable. It doesn't have a predictable force, something we didn't know at the time, of course, but the change still remains. I would say 100% the quantity over quality was the reason, and there was an effect all over Swedish society because we very rapidly became industrialized in the same area. We get a huge influx, one could say, in a metaphorical view, of masonry. The ideas of the masonry, constructing, doing things quantity-wise. Not very sharp, not very exact, not very aesthetic, but loads of quantity. In that time period, more houses were constructed per year than ever before in Sweden, because we got the means to do it more quickly. And our produce just escalated like this. So that's one of the reasons. It has an incredibly pervasive power. Quantity looks very big, and these graphs and the piles, you can imagine, it's like having a whole herd of buffaloes attacking you. It's massive, and you just succumb to the massiveness of it. The figures are overwhelming, and I can directly admit I've been using them myself. I don't have a choice. I need to fight this quantity with quantity. Otherwise, people will just point at you to say, well, this is a very common thing. That's a subjective statement. Remember, you who heard it before, what I read in my school book when I was young. It said, what is true in an objective sense is that 2 and 2 equals 4. Where it's subjective that fillet of pork is better than sausage. So we were already sort of put into this idea as early on. And of course this is an obvious marginalization of qualities of the cardinals taking the lead, the ordinals being the lesser thing. And it's even gone to this far that cardinals today are supposed to be stable somehow, so we can't use them. It's always the same order wherever you go. And that's a very powerful marginalization, because then they don't have any effect anymore. They have been made the subservient slaves of cardinals. They don't have the free life of themselves. I would say quality needs to come into the picture once more, because quantum physics, I won't mention here, but it's definitely quality-wise. But also for our own sakes, we can't tell the future. We could have no idea in Italy in the 70s that the propaganda duo were coming, and it was just happenstance that managed to stop it. It would have been a disaster for Italy to be governed by these people. They had little or none idea of how to governing a nation. And they would have governed the nation according to masonry. I don't know how well that would have gone. I fear the worst, and I know exactly what a dictatorship did to Spain. 40 years of dictatorship in Spain, it was back to Stone Age. So this is an appel, as we say in Swedish, for quality rather than quantity. Cardinals, they're good, but ordinals are actually the real McCoy. That's what we should use to understand things. I bid you a pleasant afternoon and have a very nice day. Bye bye for now.